Thanks, Jennifer, for getting the recording going. I see all of our presenters are with us. My name's Matt Inzio. I'm CDOT's Communications Director. Just one quick logistical note, particularly for media who are on, please use the raise hand or the chat function so that we can make sure that we keep track of your questions and make sure that we can get to them all. Lastly, for any non-media, particularly local partners who might be joining, this is a media briefing, so please make sure that we let the press go first in going through their questions and make sure that they're able to get what they need out of this briefing as well. With that, I will turn things over to CDOT's Executive Director, Shoshana Liu. Shoshana, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Shoshana Liu, CDOT's Executive Director. I'm joined today by Mike Goolsby, our Northwest Regional Transportation Director, John Lorme, CDOT's Maintenance and Operations Director, as well as Major David Rollins with District 4 for the Colorado State Patrol. Glenwood Canyon continues to experience severe impacts from debris flows along the burn scar areas from the Grizzly Creek fire that took place last summer. A safety closure continues to be in place for Interstate 70 in Glenwood Canyon, and it is anticipated to last through the weekend. The extended safety closure is necessary due to the significant cleanup required after Thursday's mudslides and debris flows, as well as continued heavy rain in the forecast, compounding the events we've seen over the past few weeks. CDOT reminds travelers that weather and safety conditions can shift precipitously in a matter of moments in this area, and weather forecasts suggest rain and significant mudslide risks throughout the weekend. I will now turn things over to CDOT's Northwest Regional Director, Mike Goolsby, to run through a review of the events of the last 24 hours, including the status of travelers. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Director Liu. After last summer's Grizzly Creek fire, CDOT developed a protocol to anticipate and respond to the threat of flooding and debris flows. When the National Weather Service issues a flash flood watch, we send traffic control teams to predetermined points on the interstate to be ready to shut the road down. When the Weather Service issues a flash flood warning, we close the interstate until the warning expires and we confirm it's safe. At approximately 4:30 p.m. yesterday, Thursday, July 29th, Interstate 70 through Glenwood Canyon was closed due to a flash flood warning for the Grizzly Creek burn scar area. CDOT closed I-70 at the predetermined standard exits to keep the traveling public safe and to access recommended detour routes. At 6 p.m., that flash flood warning and flash flood watch expired, and I-70 was reopened. Later last night at approximately 9 p.m., a new flash flood warning went into effect after storm cells quickly built up in the area. Mudslides and debris reached I-70 within a few minutes. Throughout this time, CDOT highway maintenance personnel were working to secure the roadway and protect life safety while debris was flowing down on the roadway. CDOT temporarily evacuated its operations center in Hanging Lake Tunnel and had operations personnel working in the complex shelter in place for their safety. By approximately 10:45 p.m., the Hanging Lake Tunnel Operations Center was back online. CDOT staff at the tunnel assisted travelers who were trapped on I-70 by debris flows and sought shelter at Hanging Lake Tunnel. 29 motorists sheltered at the tunnel complex overnight. In total, CDOT has accounted for 108 individuals who have been either evacuated to Glenwood Canyon or from Glenwood Canyon to Glenwood Springs or have been moved to a safe place. CDOT crews are now working to regain operational access through Glenwood Canyon because the National Weather Service has placed this area back under a flash flood watch. There is a limited window of time to move all of the abandoned vehicles to safety. With significant additional rain forecast in the area and the possibility of additional debris flows, I-70 will remain closed between exits 87, which is West Rifle, and exit 133, which is Dot Cerro. This closure will last at least through the weekend. I'll now turn the floor over to Major David Rollins from the Colorado State Patrol to share an overview of the partnership and the work so far. Major.
Thank you, Director Goolsby. The State Patrol's primary focus during these flooding events is life safety of the travelers within Glenwood Canyon and all the alternate routes around the state. Throughout the evening and today, we worked with CDOT and our other local partners to assist those stranded motorists who were impacted by the debris flows. We are also deploying additional staffing on the alternate routes that motorists are using to travel around the closure. Again, our primary focus is to ensure safe travels for all the motorists on these alternate highways and we'll be assisting those motorists with directions, car trouble, and encouraging safe driving habits. We want to remind drivers that these smaller highways around the state will be busier than normal with all the detoured traffic. We ask everyone to have patience and plan ahead for the extended travel times. We want everyone to get to their destination safely. I'll turn things over to John Lorme, CDOT's Director of Maintenance and Operations, to discuss the ongoing response to this closure and how CDOT is working from a statewide perspective for this event and similar ones throughout the state.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Major. So from a CDOT's perspective, this is an all-hands effort by maintenance forces throughout CDOT. We have over 200 maintenance patrols throughout the state, and all of those patrols are providing some kind of resources to reinforce Grand Junction. But because Section 2, Grand Junction, maintenance personnel who normally live and work around Glenwood Canyon have been responding to these floods and these debris flows for over 5 weeks, and they're getting kind of worn out and tired. So we are working with our other 7 maintenance sections across the state to bring in personnel from places like Denver metro area, the Northeast, the Southeast of Colorado, Southwest sections, all to relieve and to reinforce the Grand Junction patrols. We want to be able to let them get a couple hours home time with their families and get some sleep and then get back at it safely. So this has been going on for 6 straight weeks, and it does take its toll on everyone. So it is an all hands on deck kind of disaster, if you will. So we are providing all the resources we can. Additionally to personnel, we're sending heavy equipment as well. We're sending a large number of tandem dump trucks, bucket loaders, vac trucks to clean out drainage systems. We're also sending additional radios. We're trying to beef up on a temporary basis our cellular communication networks within the Glenwood Canyon area. So it is all hands on deck. At the same time, this is happening throughout the state in a number of other places, and it's not just burn scar areas, it's just the way sometimes Mother Nature is. So currently right now on Highway 14 in Larimer County is closed between County Road 103 and Rustic due to a flash flood watch right now. And not too far from Glenwood Canyon, where Mike's crews are valiantly trying to hold back Mother Nature, Highway 133 experienced 20 different debris flows last night. The local supervisor on Highway 33 last night, who has been on the job for over 20 years, said it was absolutely epic in the amount of debris that has come down the highway. And yet crews have managed to maintain this safe environment for our traveling public. So hats off to those guys, and hats off to everybody out there and all our partners that are supporting this effort. And it's not just like I mentioned, the Region 3 crews, but it's the entire state that's come to address this problem. So with that, I'll turn it back over to my boss, Shoshana.
Thanks, John. And I will pick up on that final point to underscore the risks that severe weather pose right now, both in Glenwood Canyon and throughout areas of Colorado that are affected by similar conditions. As Mike mentioned, we are very grateful that CDOT has now accounted for 108 individuals who have now either been evacuated from the canyon or moved to a safe place. Safety is the first and highest priority, and making sure that we do everything that we can to protect the safety of the traveling public is critical. We ask the public to be aware of these threats and to plan ahead before you travel, especially during this active monsoon season. Visit cotrip.org for the latest information about road closures and travel conditions, and bear with us as we take actions to keep people safe. With that, we have some time for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Liu. I've seen one in the chat and a hand raised already, but if other members of the press want to queue up and use those same functions, I think I saw that the first hand raised was with Chris Vanderveen. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Chris Vanderveen with 9 News. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
I've hopefully relatively 2 quick questions. First of all, can you describe when our helicopter flew over I-70 about 10:45 today, there was clearly a lot of debris on the road. Can you describe what kind of progress you've made throughout the day in terms of getting that debris off of I-70? Is it better? Is it the same? Are you going to wait it out because you know you're going to keep I-70 closed over the weekend? That's first question. And second question, we got a couple of people who were stuck in it last night had told us that somebody actually might have commandeered a front end loader from CDOT last night and kind of helped in an impromptu fashion get rid of some of the debris on the road. Can somebody confirm that with CDOT? Thank you.
you want me to take both of those, Matt?
Go ahead, Mike.
Let's start with the second one first. Yeah, somebody got in one of our loaders from Bear Ranch and proceeded down the interstate. Unfortunately, the loader that they got into was actually one that was waiting to get repaired. They used it until it ran out of hydraulic fluid. The nice thing about it is the individual that was operating it was kind enough not to ruin it and turned it off when he realized that it was the check engine light came on. So a valiant effort, but unfortunately grabbed a piece of equipment that we were waiting to work on. So the second one is, to be honest, what our main concern was over the course of the last, how many ever hours it's been now, was the rescue operation to try to get the vehicles out of the canyon and the folks out of the canyon. We've been able to punch a hole through most of the debris fields. And that has allowed us access with our equipment and has afforded us the opportunity to get all of the vehicles out except for 3. And those 3 vehicles were either trapped in the mud flow or they were abandoned. And then we have 1 commercial vehicle that's still stuck. Everything else has been able to evacuate the canyon either to the west of Glenwood Springs or into the Bear Ranch rest area until we can get another pilot hole punched through eastbound to remove the rest of those vehicles, which I'm hoping that I get news at any time that that's been accomplished. Not a lot of specific cleanup. It was more about making sure everybody was safe first. And then depending on if it goes into a flash flood warning here at some point, my folks won't be in the canyon until such time as those expire. And we'll start again. Hopefully nothing else impacts us this evening. Hopefully that answered your question, Chris.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Seeing our next one in the chat coming from Noelle Phillips. Noelle, go ahead and unmute, please. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I wanted a little more clarification on the 108. Were those 108 motorists, or does that include CDOT employees and area residents? Who is the 108?
The 108. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Real quick, was members of the public, does not include CDOT.
Okay, so were all those motorists?
Correct.
Okay, and then do you know how many total vehicles were stranded on the interstate?
Between 29 and 35, depending on which portion of the morning you were to ask.
Okay. And someone else right behind me asked if anyone else is still trapped, and are you still looking for anybody?
No, on both of those questions.
Okay.
We believe we are extremely confident that we have accounted for everyone and every vehicle.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Noelle. And seeing also in the chat that Eleanor Bennett had a follow-up right there. Eleanor, why don't you jump in and let's make sure that your questions are asked and answered.
Hi there. That actually was my question.
Okay.
Noelle asked it for me.
Great, thank you. Trying to keep us in chronological order here. I believe Miguel from CPR is next. Miguel, go ahead and unmute. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Miguel with CPR. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So this was an interesting situation, given that there had been a flash flood warning. The road had been closed in the afternoon. The warning was lifted, so the road was reopened. And then you got a really late night flash flood warning. I guess this question would be maybe for Mike or somebody from CDOT, but why didn't the road just stay closed throughout that entire time? And given what happened yesterday, is that going to change how you close the road or how long you keep the road closed in the future?
So the specific answer to that is based on the radar, based on the fact that the flash flood warning had dropped and the radar around Glenwood Canyon and around Glenwood basically showed no activity whatsoever, the decision was made to open the road. And unfortunately, within about 45 minutes, that cell built. National Weather Service gave us as much warning as possible. Unfortunately, Miguel, as you know, when we had the conversation the other day, it was immediately, sometimes the warning comes about the same time as the water does. And that unfortunately is what happened. And I wish we would have had a little bit more warning, but that was unfortunately how much we had. And I don't know that it'll change. If it was to change, it would be closed more. And we're trying to keep that fine line and to keep things as safe as possible and still operate the interstate. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time last night, and it impacted us very quickly.
So given that situation, then if a similar situation were to happen again in the future, you still don't know whether you would still kind of follow the same protocol that you have, closing it as soon as the warning comes?
We've been fairly successful doing that. And I don't know that we would change our protocol. We actually kept it closed about 45 minutes past the end of the warning last night. We deemed it safe based on the radar and based on what information we had. So, you know, the bad thing is meteorologists, or the good thing is they work on probabilities and they make the best guesses that they can make. And unfortunately, this snuck up on all of us. So it was unfortunate, but I think based on the circumstances, we could add a lot more vehicles in there had we not reacted as quickly as we did.
Thanks, Miguel. We have a number of folks with questions in the chat, and I'll try to get to you chronologically. I see a John K. If you want to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi. I live in Carbondale. I guess my question to you guys is more of a long-term issue about when are we going to have a long-term solution? I mean, are you guys working with the federal government, which I assume has some sort of oversight of the freeway, and everybody else involved to come up with a long-term solution to this? I mean, I can imagine the disruption that businesses and everybody else is dealing with this thing going on day in and day out. And again, setting aside the great job you guys are doing to try to keep it operating. But I mean, it seems to me that there's got to be some long-term solution that you guys and everybody else who's an expert can come up with. It might cost money, but you know, that's what our state or federal government is for. Thank you.
I'm looking to Director Liu and Director Goolsby. Not sure who wants to go first.
I can start. You know, I think first and foremost, we are absolutely working closely with federal officials who manage the interstate program of which I-70 is a part. You know, I think over the long term, the ecology after a fire typically stabilizes. You know, there's sort of a cycle where after an extreme event like the one that we encountered last summer, it creates fragilities in the ecosystem that then play out in the aftermath. That doesn't last forever, but it does mean that there's an enhanced risk in the period thereafter. You know, there have already been a number of actions taken, with more to come, to do everything that we can to stabilize to the extent possible, given the kind of big forces of Mother Nature that are at play. You know, to give an example, there's a berm at the top of the Hanging Lake Tunnel that was built last summer, and that has probably saved the tunnel asset a number of times over the course of this season. And it was something that was done by the fire response team last year to be able to manage the water and mud coming down atop the tunnel. You know, there have been additional mitigation fences sort of put up against the roadway. You know, there's work going on across government entities to revegetate to the extent possible. You know, but the vegetation that can grow in the period of a few months is not as strong as the trees that burned down, over the course of last year. You know, I think over the next few weeks, we will obviously be evaluating, and our engineering team has been out there, consistently and rapidly looking at what's happening with the sort of channels on the river and the impacts on the wall that stabilizes the roadway, to sort of see how that plays out. It's a bit soon at this point to know what the long-term effects of what we've been seeing over the last few weeks are, but that assessment typically happens in the period, during and after a major event like this one. But that said, there are some very big natural forces at play here that are, just create sort of fundamental challenges that, some of which can be accelerated and some of which nature heals over time. And Mike, is there anything you would add?
I don't believe I would, Director. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Liu, and thank you, John. As I keep going through this list, hope folks understand that I'll be asking you to ask your question out loud, so that, as this meeting is recorded and posted to YouTube, that record is available for everyone to understand what the questions and answers were. And so our next one comes from Allie Friedman. Allie, if you could go ahead and unmute, please.
Hi, yeah, Allie Friedman with Denver 7. Quick question. So we have a bunch of new people moving to our state. We've heard over the last few days that Coloradans should treat these road closures similar to how they treat road closures through the winter months. Can you just walk people through a checklist of items they should keep in mind or keep in their cars if they do plan to head up into the mountains?
Well, I can start, and then I'd like for John and Mike to weigh in as well. I think particularly for drivers who are coming from softer climates than the one we live in, it's very important to realize that the roads through areas like Glenwood Canyon, are not the same as the interstates that go through many other parts of the country, right? And I think just being mindful that that the conditions are a lot harsher, that it requires a level of focus, attention, and being sort of cognizant of the possibility that things could change quickly is not something you're necessarily going to experience in other parts of the country. So really, first and foremost, only get behind the wheel if you're comfortable with the conditions into which you're going. And, just like you would be aware of your skill level if you were going to play a sport, be aware of your driving skill level before you get behind the wheel going into some of these complex terrains on the highway system. I think in the winter, we remind people to use snow tires, and we'll take every opportunity to remind folks who are coming from out of state that that's something you need to have in your inventory. But in a similar vein, all year round, making sure that your tires are appropriately treaded and have the inflation that they need to be able to keep your ride steady, making sure that your car has the maintenance that it needs to be able to drive smoothly. All of that are prerequisites, and be especially cautious when driving rental cars to make sure that they're sort of equipped for the conditions into which they're going. Most do not have snow tires in the winter. Not all have all-wheel drive, and all of these are things to be aware of if you're driving a car that's not your own. In terms of checklist items, making sure that you have food and water in case an extremity comes upon you. It's something that in snowstorms we remind drivers of consistently, and here too it's the case. That to make sure you have those things, having some layers and blankets in your car. John, what else would you add?
It's kind of hard to top that, but I would say if kind of make it a rule, and we do with all of our drivers and especially our supervisors that transition throughout the state. Whenever we're going somewhere, we tell more than 30 minutes from our house or work location, we always notify somebody else that we're going, just so like if last night happened and you have no cell service, somebody knows where to look for you. Sounds kind of like maybe prehistoric, but Colorado can be a pretty harsh environment to live and work in. That would be number one. Number two is I would always check CoTrip before you go anywhere up in the mountains or anywhere pretty much away from your house more than your normal daily commuting. CoTrip is loaded with information. Like the boss said, I would have warm clothes of some kind. If it's just a jacket and maybe a pair of winter boots or a small blanket, I would always keep water with you of some kind, at least a couple bottles of water, some snacks, a flashlight, a cell phone charger, and possibly a first aid kit. And then basically stay in communication with people. And if you find yourself in trouble, sometimes the best thing to do is stop on the side of the road and wait for help instead of trying to transition through areas where you're not accustomed to, or you're kind of lost or overwhelmed by the terrain. And I'm thinking of like Red Mountain Pass and Wolf Creek Pass and even Summit Pass. So just to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So just think about what you're doing and where you're going, and imagine yourself being stuck in your vehicle for anywhere between 10 or 12 hours. And what would you do? And last but not least, I would actually keep some baby wipes with you as well. And I'll let you kind of like figure out what those are for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike or back to Matt.
Wow, I don't even know how to go from there, John. So I'm just going to let Matt take the next question.
Thanks to you all, and I'll keep going down our list. Our next question comes from Thomas Piper. Thomas, if you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I'm just, this is Thomas Piper with the AP. I'm just wondering if you could give us a sense of how big the mudslide in the canyon was, how deep it was, how long it was, what stretch was closed, and if anything was buried. Also, if you could speak to just the fact that no one was injured, if that's surprising to you.
So it's not one, it's multiple. We'll start there. It basically, the last couple times it's closed, it's been in spot locations throughout the canyon, one or two places at a time. Right now we have approximately 10 places, all the way from basically the no name rest area out to Dot Cerro, which is basically 1 mile marker 119 out to mile marker 131. Size wise, they vary anywhere from water and small debris that's spread out over a couple hundred yards or more to actual debris flows of bigger rock, mud, and trees that are anywhere from 20 to 150 feet wide, upwards of 10 to 12 feet deep. One of the ones that ran over both the eastbound and westbound portions of the interstate with such force that it broke a section of the parapet wall off of the westbound, and a majority of that debris ended up in the river farther down from the previous mud flow, debris flow that we had. So to get into the specifics of each one of those slides would be extremely difficult for me to do at this time, but it's multiple, upwards of 10. And it's impacted not just one or two locations, but it's throughout the entirety of the canyon. So that's made it somewhat difficult as well. From an injury standpoint, I'm very grateful that no one was hurt. There were two cars that were actually surrounded, inundated by two of the debris flows. Those individuals were fortunate and they walked away from it. Their cars are not in very good shape, but they are. From a surprising standpoint, I would think that again, I'm knocking on wood that nobody was injured. And hopefully that we've tried our hardest not to have people in the canyon when these flash flood warnings hit, but it was the best case scenario for all of us based on the outcome this morning. So I hope I answered that.
So were those the only two that were buried or partially surrounded?
There were three. Those are the three vehicles we currently have in the canyon right now. One is a commercial vehicle that can't move because it's basically packed with mud from the top of the wheel wells all the way around the trailer. Based on the weather, we were hoping to get a heavy tow truck in there and remove it, but we're not going to let anybody go back in the canyon just due to the current weather forecast. The other two, same thing. Once we have the opportunity, we will remove those and get in touch with the folks that own those vehicles and make arrangements to get them to a place that they can do something with them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Next on our chat list here, I have Evan Krugel. Evan, please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah. Hey guys, you actually answered my previous question, but could you talk about the railroad tracks there? Were those damaged, and is there any kind of long-term impacts there?
Well, the larger debris flow that was in the river prior, what we referred to as Devil's Hole, we had started cutting a pilot channel in there yesterday. If you were to look at it this morning, you wouldn't see any of the accomplishment of what we did yesterday because it filled back in. The railroad bridge that is there was about 5 feet of free space underneath that bridge prior to last night. Now there's a couple feet underneath there. So I know they've run a couple of trains through there today, so I don't know that it's impacted them at this point.
Thanks, Evan. Seeing one more here that might have been answered just since it was put into the chat, but want to confirm for Mac, who had a question about stuck vehicles as well, if you're okay.
Yeah, I just heard that. I just want to make sure. So basically, right now, there are only 3 vehicles that are stuck, and one is a commercial vehicle. There are no other vehicles stuck, and all the motorists, the 108, are taken care of, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mac. Seeing one last in the chat before we get back to the hands. This came from KDVR Digital, so I'm not sure who over there is able to unmute and ask just so that we can get it into the recording.
Yes, sorry about that. It takes me a while to unmute. So basically, a lot of people are asking questions just about the detours. So I want to see if we could get a status update on using Highway 50 as a detour. And then I have a quick follow-up.
Yeah, so we've been working closely with, since it's in Region 3, we've been working closely with the project team on Highway 50. When this all occurred, the project team for Highway 50 was in contact with us, and we opened Highway 50 up at least through the weekend to take some of the pressure off the northern detour route. And we'll reevaluate that and coordinate with them on Monday, depending on how close we are to opening the road. And if we need to, we will make arrangements at that point. But right now, Highway 50 has been open since 6:30 this morning.
I would just
And just
quickly,
to follow up, I know you guys aren't really into the estimation game, especially when we're talking about a closure this massive, but people are asking, do you have any idea when this thing could be back open?
So I think when we had the conversation last week and somebody asked me the same question, I wasn't going to give you all an answer, and I'm not going to give you all an answer now, just due to the fact that I don't know what the weather's going to do to us this weekend. And until I know what the weather's going to do to us, I would even hate to guess to have an estimate. We're going to shoot for Monday, if not sooner, but if the weather doesn't cooperate and brings more material down, it could be extended past that.
And I can also add to that, just to kind of talk about the detour routes. CDOT works hand in hand with UDOT, KDOT, YDOT, and we are messaging from state line to state line, especially for out-of-staters that are transitioning through Colorado to bypass Colorado using I-80 to the north. So as commercial motor vehicles and cross-country traffic approaches Colorado from Kansas, they're being instructed and guided to take I-25 north and then basically take I-80 to the west and then keep going that way. And same thing with as they're coming in from Utah, is once they get towards Seattle to bound to the north and then take I-80 around Colorado to help alleviate some of the stress on the system with this closure. So we are definitely working and reaching out of state to try to mitigate this.
yeah, I would just add regarding the prior question about the status of the Highway 50 closure and the project construction on that route. There's been very close coordination for the past weeks, given the situation in Glenwood Canyon and the construction that's underway on 50, to make sure that we're not encumbering two routes at once. And for the duration of this closure, that area on 50 will be open so that exists as a detour.
Thanks all. As I'm tracking it, Miguel, I think that you've got your hand raised for next question, so go ahead.
Yes, just did have one follow-up question, if you don't mind, sort of explaining to me exactly how it can happen that, despite you calling a closure, right, and closing at both points, both exits, how more than a dozen vehicles can still kind of find themselves stuck within that space.
Well, it's fairly easy to explain. When you close an interstate or you close a road, there's traffic between the closure points, and that traffic has to go somewhere. And if they continue down the interstate, so let's just say if you close at mile marker 1 and you have vehicles between mile marker 1 and mile marker 2, and you're going to close mile marker 2, they're probably past that point before you get that closed. So it happens. It's about a 20-minute process to clear the interstate, basically from mile marker 87 to mile marker 133. So it's not an instantaneous closure. You'll get traffic filtering through at any given point. Once we close at West Rifle or at Dot Cerro, it takes approximately 20 to 25 minutes to get all of the traffic out of Glenwood Canyon, if there's any traffic in there from the east end to the west end or vice versa. So that's a best case scenario. If you're driving the speed limit, that's about what it is. If you're going faster than that, then you're probably going to get through there faster. But I would say that the entire process from one end to the other is about 40 minutes. If you were to leave Rifle to get to Dotsero and you hit everything just right, it would be about 40 to 45 minutes before you got to the other end. So that's
Mike,
a difficult thing to try.
Something else that Mike and his team are doing is they're proactively closing the rest areas so that they can get the entire canyon cleared out a lot faster to whatever vehicles are transitioning from east to west or vice versa. So they're definitely proactively monitoring and restricting as much vehicles as they can without hindering, if you will, traffic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. I see a question from Matt Bennett in the chat. Matt, if you want to unmute and ask it so we can get it into the recording, go ahead.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for the time. I was just hoping to get a clarification if all 108 individuals that needed assistance were in fact out of the canyon, or if any were still with CDOT officials in a safe location somewhere in the canyon.
Yeah, so approximately 30 of those individuals were escorted out earlier this morning. Some of them have, I would say there's approximately 65 to 70 at the Bear Ranch Rest area, which we are in process of trying to punch a hole through to get them out of the canyon the rest of the way. Major Rollins's staff is out there with them. We've been able to bring them some food and water. And based on the update I just got a little while ago, we're hoping to have that to the point that they can exit there within the hour. If not, we've made arrangements to get all of those folks out of there if it goes to a warning, so that they're not in the canyon. But currently Bear Ranch and the rest area is one of the safe places that we have folks. Did that help?
Yes, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Matt. I see one more hand raised from Karen Morfitt. Karen, please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, my question is just in regard to Coloradans and folks who are traveling through that area, possibly getting stuck. We heard a lot of people were getting out of their vehicles and trying to run to safety. Can you just speak to, if that's something you think people should make a decision to do based on their situation, or what's your advice to those who maybe made that decision?
Well, if it was me, I would advise them to stay in their vehicle. That's probably safer than getting out into a debris flow or into water. Most of the places that, I guess the one thing that I would throw out there is most of the places out there, if you're in between a debris flow, that's the safest place to be, because there's probably not going to be any material in those. But the one thing I would advise folks is when you're out, if you were to get trapped in something like that, don't turn around and go back the way you came, because you could, one, cause an accident with somebody coming up to you, or two, you may be putting yourself in more harm. But if it was me, I would stay in my vehicle.
Kind of a follow-up to that. Did you see a number of people doing that during this slide?
Yes. On both accounts, yes, we did. We had vehicles turn around and travel the wrong way in the eastbound portion of the interstate, and we also had folks out playing in the mud, I guess, for the lack of a better way to put it, after everything kind of calmed down. So I understand it. I understand being cooped up like that's probably not the best thing, but I would stay with my vehicle until such time as that's probably not the best thing to do.
Thanks, Karen. We got one more raised hand from Vicente. Please go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you. And pardon me, because I had to buzz out a couple of times to file a report. I just came back and heard that it sounded like you said, and I wanted to confirm this, that there are 60 to 70 people still stuck or at least can't get out and are with CDOT crews at the Bear Ranch Rest area. Is that correct? Can you please paint that picture? Are they in buses, or are there shelters? What's that like there, and how long before you can get them out?
So the people that are Bear Ranch Rest area, those are a lot of the vehicles that were stuck in between the debris flows. Our crews were able to go in, open up some of those areas to get them to a safe place, which is the Bear Ranch Rest area. So a lot of them, or most of them, have their vehicles with them. We're just in the process now of making it safe and getting a hole punched through the next piece of it so that they can proceed out of the canyon east. If we go to a warning, or our staff and the meteorologists on John's staff deem it that there's a storm coming, we've made arrangements to evacuate those folks out and leave their cars. But right now, our crews are still working to hopefully expedite them out of the canyon with all of their stuff so that they can continue on their way.
And to clarify, I'm imagining logically have it that they slept in their cars or stayed with their cars this whole time. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you confirm that number again of the people in the exit at the Bear Ranch rest area?
I believe it's 60 to 75, and the reason that I'm giving you that estimate is a few of those folks we traveled westbound, but all of the vehicles and the people that were in those vehicles are in the rest area right now, the ones that were eastbound. I believe there's only 3 individuals that don't have a vehicle, and Major Rollins and his staff are going to take care of those folks when we can get them through and get them to a safer location this evening.
Thanks, everyone. I'm doing a quick scan across the screen, and I'm not seeing additional questions queued at the moment.
There are a couple more in the box.
Oh, sure thing. Miguel, did you have another follow-up to confirm on injuries?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to confirm with you all that there was no reported injuries so far.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And the last one I'm seeing here, it actually came as a comment, but if Nick could please unmute and go ahead and make that point so that we have it on the recording. Go ahead. Might not be able to, but I'll go ahead and read it through it as I can. A comment of, expressing concern about road rage, particularly on the detour routes, and an individual who's been witness apparently to several near misses, and hoping that we can speak to the issue here, particularly on these detour routes that are experiencing more pressure. And looks like one more question coming through from Ray. Please go ahead and unmute if you don't mind so we can get it on here.
Absolutely. Ray Erke with the Glenwood Springs Post Independent. I'm just really curious over the past 6 weeks how much CDOT has actually spent in relation to mitigating debris flows and mudslides in the Glenwood Canyon. Thank you.
Well, I can take a swag at it for you, and working with John's staff and my staff. Currently, really the only costs we're incurring are maintenance costs and their response costs. And we're approximately, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last number based on the aggregate total so far is around $250,000. That includes all our wages and labor forces that are out there, our equipment, and any of the folks that are coming from the other parts of the state, hotels and per diem for those folks. So that's about, and John, you can correct me, but I think that's about where we're at, but we haven't started aggregating, we haven't started adding everything up into the last 24-hour period yet.
Spot on, Mike.
So Shoshana or Matt, if I could, I apologize. I was kind of doing two things at once, but part of the reason was I wanted to let everybody know on the call that we're in the process right now of evacuating the folks out of Bear Ranch to the east, which is a positive thing. So hopefully within the next hour, we'll have everybody out of the canyon completely. So breaking news, I guess.
Thanks for that update, Mike. I'm not seeing any other questions queued, so I'll just quickly check with Director Liu for any final thoughts before we close things out.
I would just add to the cost question that there's going to be a process over the next few weeks of sort of starting to accumulate the longer term damage, and that's happening. And with any event, including this one, typically the cost estimate lags a bit. So we will stay close on sharing that information with you as the estimates evolve. But like John and Mike said, you have staff from across the department coming in right now, so it's kind of a mix of workforce from basically all of the maintenance regions at CDOT, with the exception that Region 4 and parts of Region 5, which are north and southwest regions, are also encountering similar conditions in other parts of the state. And then you have those surging across different areas, and that's something that's likely going to continue over the coming weeks, and will be all part of the cost estimate that we pull together.
Thanks, Director Liu. With no more questions, I think we'll go ahead and conclude. Particularly for members of the media, if there are additional follow-ups that you need, you should have contact information in the advisory that we sent earlier this afternoon. But with that, thank you all for attending and for your great questions today. Thanks, Jennifer. Just heard that piece.